culture, Jen.
Oh yeah?
So, did you guys learn about understanding intercultural transition?
Yeah, we learned about that. Are you guys learning about that too?
Yes.
Great. So what do you think about that?
I think the subject is so interesting.
Me too. Okay, let's do some review about that
Alright.
subject. Okay.
Throughout history, people have traveled across cultural boundaries for many different reasons. Experts estimate that 25 people cross national borders every second and 1 billion journeys per year. Why people leave their country? They leave their country because national revolutions, civil war, and guest workers, refugees, tourists, or study abroad students. Think about how the privilege disadvantage dialectic structure some kinds of intercultural transitions. For example, business people who live abroad while working for transnational corporations often are economically privileged. In contrast, refugees often lack financial resources in their new host location. They may have few opportunities to meet other people, travel in their new homeland, or purchase basic necessities. In this way, they may not view their new environment in the same way as a more privileged migrant. For example, a Muslim woman may feel that she cannot wear her chadar in certain US contexts and cannot express her religious identity. The dialectic calls for a balance between the individual and contextual demands. There are two types of migrant groups. The first is voluntary migrants and the second is involuntary migrant. There are two groups of voluntary travelers. Sojourners are those travelers who move into new cultural contexts for a limited time and a specific purpose. An immigrant is a family who voluntarily leave one country to settle in another exemplified. US Americans believe that most immigrants come to the US in search of freedom. The truth is, the primary reason people come to the US is to join other family members, and two other primary reasons are for employment and to escape from war, famine, or poverty. There are two kinds of migrant labor: cheap manual labor and highly skilled intellectual labor. Newly industrializing country need trained labor for routine and repetitive tasks. And also, newly rich country and individuals are in need of domestic service. Increasing numbers of immigrant workers are women. Yes, women. Why? Because they are often more reliable than men and they are increasingly doing manual work and employed as domestic. They describe how millions of women from poor countries in the south migrate to do the women's work of the north and work that middle and upper class women are no longer able or willing to do. For example, Mexican and Latin American women are the domestic for US women, and Asian migrant women work in British home. More and more people are moving temporarily. Now let's move into involuntary immigrants. There are two types of migrant move involuntarily. The first is long-term refugees and the second is short-term refugees. Most refugees are from developing countries and flee to other nearby developing countries. In Africa, conflict between the Muslim North and the Christian South of Sudan moved refugees to Chad, Kenya, and other neighboring countries. In Somalia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, internal conflict have sent refugees fleeing over the last decade. Most refugees, whether they have migrated domestically or internationally, want to return home as soon as possible, and an unprecedented number have done just that in the last 4 years, an estimate 6 million.
This is the immigrant. The relationship between immigrants and their hosts are very complex. And understanding these relationships requires a dialectical approach. International migration is usually a carefully considered individual or family decision. The major reason to migrate can involve economic and or non-economic reasons and complex push-pull factors. An economic migrant may be encouraged to move by a host employer recruiter pulling him or her to migrate, or a push factor might be lack of jobs in the home country. The immigrant may be simultaneously accepted and rejected. Social psychologist John Berry developed a framework that considers the relationship of migrants and hosts and their attitude toward each other cultures, resulting in 4 types of relationship. When the migrant value their host culture more than their own, they are assimilate. When the migrant value their culture more than the host, they are separated. When migrant value both, they integrate, and migrant value neither their host nor their culture, they are marginalized. This is assimilation. Individual does not want to maintain an isolate cultural identity but wants to maintain relationship with other groups in the new culture. the migrant is more or less welcomed by the new cultural host. When this course is freely chosen by everyone, it creates the archetypal melting pot. The central focus in assimilation is not on retaining one's cultural heritage. For them, assimilating may not require adjusting to new customs. The same religions dominate eating practice. The use of forks, knife, and spoon are the same, and many other cultural practices are already familiar. When the dominant group forces assimilation, especially on immigrants whose customs are different from those of the whole society, it creates a pressure cooker. When migrants choose to retain their original culture and avoid interaction with other groups, it's called separation. They maintain their own way of life and identity and avoid prolonged contact with other groups. They don't have television or radios, go to movies, or read mainstream newspaper or books. An important point here is that this group choose separation and the dominant society respect their choice. The Amis, for example, do not participate in US popular culture, and they don't want to. However, if such separation is initiated and enforced by the dominant society, the condition constitutes a second type of separation. This is segregation.
Integration. Integration occurs when immigrants have an interest both in maintaining their original culture and language, and in having daily interaction with other groups. This is different from assimilation. Immigrants can resist assimilation in many ways, for example, by insisting on speaking their own language in their home. One immigrant from Ghana, Mary, described her home. Mary described how her family participates in other aspects of American life, such as enjoying American music. They listen to calypso, high life, jazz, and sometimes R&B. Other immigrants, like Asian Indians in the United States, maintain a strong sense of their ethnic identity by celebrating Indian holidays like Navaratri, the Hindu festival that celebrates cosmic good over evil.
In some families, individual members choose different paths of relating to the larger culture. This can cause tension when children want to assimilate and parents prefer a more integrative mode. However, the study also revealed that children raised in the same house could have very different attitudes towards adaptation and religion. For example, two sisters who participated in the study were raised with moderately religious parents who worship weekly, read religious articles, and spend much time thinking about God. One sister followed the tradition of the parents. She prays every day, spends time reading religious scripture, and is committed to marrying a Hindu. The other sister doesn't practice Hinduism and places emphasis on love in making a marriage decision. These kinds of difference can sometimes make communication difficult during the adaptation process. Let's look more closely at this process. Migrant communities can effectively resist assimilation in many ways. They may refuse to consume popular culture products like TV, radio, etc. Or the fashion of the host society often for many generations. Marginalization. Marginalization occurs when individuals or groups express little interest in maintaining cultural ties with either the dominant culture or the migrant culture. This situation of being out of touch with both culture may be the result of action by the dominant society. For example, when the United States government forced Native Americans to live apart from other members of their nation. However, the term marginalization has come to describe more generally individuals who live on the margin of a culture, not able to participate fully in its political and social life as a result of cultural difference.
Cultural hybridity. Migrants and their family often combine these four different modes of relating to the host society, at times assimilating, other times integrating, and still other times separating or marginalizing, forming a cultural hybrid relationship with the host culture. Many people in today's world who consider themselves the product of many cultures, not easily fitting into any of the categories, are also cultural hybrids. This adaptation process occurs in contexts varies and is circumscribed by relations of dominance and power. Cultural adaptation is the long-term process of adjusting to and finally feeling comfortable in a new environment. There are three communication approaches to studying cultural adaptation: the social science approach, the interpretive, and the critical. The social science approach focuses on the individual in the adaptation process, individual characteristics and background of the migrant, and the individual outcomes of adaptation. It includes three models: the anxiety and uncertainty management, the transition model, and the integrative model. Anxiety and uncertainty management model communication theorist William Goodekans stresses that the primary characteristic of relationship in intercultural adaptation is ambiguity. The goal of effective intercultural communication can be reached by reducing anxiety and seeking information. Uncertainty reduction is the process of lessening uncertainty in adapting to a new culture by seeking information. There are several kinds of uncertainty. Predictive uncertainty is to predict what someone will say or do, and explanatory uncertainty is to explain why people behave as they do. This model assumes that to communicate effectively we will gather information to help us reduce uncertainty and anxiety. The most effective communicators first have a solid self-concept and self-esteem, have flexible attitudes and behaviors, and the third, complex and flexible in their categorization of others. Finally, this model requires that people be open to new information and recognize alternative ways to interpret information. These principles may operate differently according to the cultural context. The theory predicts cultural variability. The transition model, culture shock and adaptation, have been viewed as a normal part of human experience. As a subcategory of transition shock, Janet Bennett suggests that culture shock and adaptation are just like any other adult transition. It depends in part on the individual. Psychologists say there are two approaches to face unfamiliar situations. First is fight approach, is a trial and error approach to coping with a new situation. And the second is flight approach, a strategy to cope with a new situation, being hesitant or withdrawn from the new environment. A third alternative is the flex approach, in which migrants use a combination of productive fight or flight behaviors. The idea is to go with the flow while keeping in mind the contextual elements. The integrative model of adjustment represents a psychic breakdown and previously held attitudes and behaviors once that work in original cultural context. Another dimension of communication is the important role of social support. When feelings of helplessness during the cultural adaptation, social support from friends can play an important role to reduce stress, clarify uncertainty, and increase a sense of identity and self-esteem. Three aspects of adaptation. First, psychological health, the state of being emotionally comfortable in a cultural context. Second, functional fitness, the ability to function in daily life in many different contexts. And intercultural identity, based on two or more cultural frames of reference.
There are three such interpretive models: the U-curve model, W-curve model, and phenomenological model. U-curve theory is a theory of cultural adaptation, posting that migrants go through very predictable phase and excitement or anticipation, shock or disorientation, adjustment in adapting to a new cultural situation. Anticipation. The first phase is the anticipation or excitement phase. When an immigrant first enters a new cultural context, he or she may be excited to be in the new situation and only a little apprehensive. Culture shock is a relatively short-term feeling of disorientation, of discomfort due to the unfamiliarity of surrounding and the lack of familiar cues in the environment. If the immigrant get the culture shock and treated properly, that is, if the immigrant learns the language, making friends and so on, the migrant can recover or adapt to the new cultural situation and feel at home. Adjustment. Adjustment is when the migrant learns the rules and customs of the new cultural context. W-curve theory is a theory of cultural adaptation that suggests that sojourners experience another U-curve upon returning home. When the migrant return home to their original cultural context, the same process of adaptation occurs and may again involve culture or re-entry shock depicted by the W-curve model. Phenomenological approach is a research approach that seeks in-depth explanation of human experiences. There are three phases in phenomenological approach, which is first taking things for granted, second making sense of new pattern, and third coming to understand new information. There are two fundamental differences between the first and second U-curve. In the initial curve or phase, the sojourner is fundamentally unchanged, experiencing new cultural context. In the re-entry phase, the sojourner has changed through the adaptation process and become a different individual. The person who returns home is not the same person who left home.